All right, this is our second lesson on the throne room. We said last week that we get this phrase, visions and revelations of the Lord, from 2 Corinthians 12:1. Paul is writing his second letter to the Corinthian church, and he says, I must go on boasting, though there is nothing to be gained by it. I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. His boasting is that he has insider information that he could boast about, but he tells himself it's wrong to boast, so I won't. But he says visions and revelations of the Lord, and he begins to describe a third heaven experience, as he calls it. And in Paul's vocabulary, the third heaven is the place where the throne is. And so when someone has a third heaven experience, when they get caught up in vision or in revelation to the throne room, this is something to be noted. There's about 10 of these accounts in the scriptures, and in this series, we're going to go through each one of them, asking ourselves the question, what do we learn about the throne room from this account, from this story? Paul tells us by revelation in the scriptures that we are seated with Christ in heavenly places, and that in the Spirit right now, there is an open door for us to be able to go in and join Jesus in intercessory prayer. These are still things that we're understanding, and it's so important to our DNA that we've put it on a sign there in our front entrance. If you see, coming into the presence of the Lord as a spiritual family to join the Lord in intercession. So we spent a lot of time on intercession this year. Now we want to specifically just think about the throne room. Paul said that we should do this. This is a Christian thing to do. He said, therefore, to the church in Colossae, therefore, if you have been raised with Christ, all of us who have been saved and baptized have been raised with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God on his throne. Keep thinking about things above. Think about the throne room. Seek the throne room. Think about the throne room. Keep seeking. Keep thinking. He says this is vital to your Christian experience, that you keep seeking and keep thinking these visions and revelations of the Lord that are written in the scriptures. Not the things on the earth, for you have died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So that's what this series is about. And today we're going to go in and talk about Job and the throne room wager. Job and the throne room wager. It starts off like this. Verse number 6 of Job chapter number 1. One day, the members of the heavenly court, in Hebrew that's the sons of God. Heavenly court is sons of God in Hebrew. Other translations just say angels. But heavenly court, a heavenly group of individuals, they came to present themselves before the Lord on his throne. And the accuser, Satan, came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. So how many of you know that when the Lord asks a question, it's not to gain information? The Lord is omniscient. One of his omnis is omniscient. So the Lord knows all. So why is he asking Satan this question, where have you come from? Well, kind of the same reason why he asked Adam and Eve the question, where are you? Right? As they're hiding behind a bush with a fig leaf and a strategic place. It's not because he wanted information. It's because, well, he wanted accountability. And he wanted disclosure from the individual, right? I want to hear you say it. I want to keep you accountable. So this is why the Lord asked this question. So Satan is systematically investigating and carefully surveying mankind. He's patrolling the earth. He's sent out to go and to inspect the condition of humanity, and to inspect their behavior, and then to report back. This is what Satan's doing in Job chapter number 1. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He's the finest man in all the earth. He's blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. What a testimony, right? He's the finest man in all the earth, a man of complete integrity. Let's just stop and talk about Job's integrity for a second. Integrity has to do with a holy consistency reflected in one's inward attitude and outward actions. Job, in his integrity, would not deny his convictional belief that God was ultimately good. He lived singing the song, God is good, right? Singing the goodness of God song. Long before Jen Johnson ever sang it, Job sang it. He sang of the goodness of the Lord all the days of his life, and he believed deep down in the deepest part of his being that God is good, and he would not allow any of his inward motives or outward actions to portray otherwise. God is good. Satan's reply to the Lord was to doubt Job's inward motives. So the Lord vindicates Job here. The idea is that Satan goes out through all the earth and he says, they're all corrupt, Lord. That's not in the text, but I think that's what's implied. They're all corrupt, Lord. They're all corrupt. None of them serve you rightly. And he says, but have you looked at Job? And here's Satan's response to Job's integrity. Satan replied to the Lord, yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You've always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You've made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Can you imagine Satan standing before Yahweh's throne and making this accusation? This, shall we call it, satanic slander. Satan cannot believe for a moment that anyone would serve God without an ulterior motive. This is meant as a slap in the Lord's face. What makes Yahweh so special and so wonderful that a person would serve him simply out of love is the accusation that Satan's making. So the slander goes something like this. What Satan is saying in this response is, Yahweh, Job's love or mankind's love for you is conditional. They don't love you, Yahweh. They don't love you. Given the choice between you and blessings, they'll choose blessings. Given the choice between you and comfort, they'll choose comfort. And given the choice between you and life, they'll choose life. This is the satanic slander. Job doesn't love you. He only loves you because of what you do for him. Stop doing that stuff for him, take that stuff away from him, and watch how he turns on you. Whew. This is allowed in the throne room with others listening, with the heavenly courts, the angelic beings, the sons of God all around. What would the look on their face be as they're hearing Satan say this, right? With such animosity, hatred, and slander. It's wild. But willing to go on with this challenge is what it is. It's a challenge. Willing to go on with this challenge and to vindicate his own name and ways before the watching angelic world, not to mention accomplish his own purposes in Job's life before the world, Yahweh gave the adversary complete freedom to attack Job. So it's a wager. You think Job's not genuine. You think he's not a true man of integrity. And you think the only reason he serves me is for stuff? Okay. All right. You may test him, the Lord said to Satan. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So Satan left the Lord's presence. Satan goes down to the earth and starts to do a few things. He makes all this converge, I believe, in one day, is the way it says it in Job chapter number 1. So Satan incites a rival clan called the Sabaeans. Sabaeans send their soldiers in to Job's fields, and they slay 500 of Job's oxen, 500 of Job's donkeys, and all of Job's servants in that particular part of his business. In the same day, Satan incites the Chaldeans, another rival clan close to Job in Uz. And the Chaldeans run in to another one of Job's properties, and they kill all of Job's camels, and they kill all of Job's servants in that part of the land. Then, in the same day, somehow, this Satan, this accuser being, is so powerful that he can actually make it so that fire falls from heaven. Fire from heaven fell down and killed 7,000 sheep in a moment's time. And then, this satanic being is so powerful that apparently he gets to affect when a windstorm comes in and how violently it comes through and what building it hits. And so a windstorm comes in to the home of Job's eldest boy, who's hosting a party for all of his brothers and sisters. So now all of Job's children are under one roof, and Satan sends a windstorm to blow over the house, killing all of Job's children in a day. That's a bad day. The result? In all of this, Job, this man of integrity, did not sin by blaming God. Wow. Okay. We need Preston hitting his little button. Round 2, fight. That's what we need right now because we're about to go into round 2. Let me just say this. God had a legitimate, ultimate reason for allowing the adversary to do his terribly destructive work in Job's life. There's a reason. The wager was the reason. To vindicate himself before the angels and ultimately to bless Job and his family more than they were blessed right now. Because the end of the story says that Job got double for his trouble, right? Job was already the richest man in the earth, and he already was rich with children, but he got even more. Okay? So that was the reason why this happened. There was a reason, but there was not a cause. And I believe the book of Job is very clear that there was not a cause. Meaning there was nothing in Job that warranted this. He didn't deserve this, is how I would say it. He didn't deserve this. I've sat with Pastor Ken several times in prayer rooms when people talk about the worst day of their life. A day they were abused, a day they lost somebody they loved, a day that is very painful, or a season of life that's very painful. And I've watched as Pastor Ken looks at them right in the eye and says, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that. And this, they want to hear that so badly. You know, you're right. I didn't deserve that. But it's like they want to be vindicated. There may be a reason for this to happen, but you didn't deserve this. You know, I've seen tears fly out of grown men's eyes. And I'm not joking. I'm not joking. I've seen tears fly out inches into the air, get airborne, and fall down on a desk in front of us when Pastor Ken or somebody in a prayer room looks at somebody and says, you didn't deserve that. And I want to, at the end of Job chapter number 1, I want to run into that story and sit right before Job as he's sitting on the ground, and I want to say, Job, you didn't deserve this. There's a reason why it's happening. But you didn't deserve this. Round 2. One day the members of the heavenly court came again to present themselves before the Lord. And the accuser, Satan, came with them. Same thing that we just read. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Same question. Satan answered the Lord, I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. The Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? With a little grin on his face. I'm going to insert my own. There's no Hebrew precedence for this, but I'm inserting it myself. He's still the finest man in all the earth. He's still blameless. He's still a man of complete integrity. He still fears God, and he still stays away from evil, even after all that you did, Job, or Satan. And he has still maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to harm him without cause. Satan replied to the Lord, skin for skin. Ooh, what a slithery thing to say. Skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life. Reach out and take away his health. He'll surely curse you to your face. All right, do to him as you please, the Lord said to Satan, but spare his life. Spare his life. So Satan goes out, Again, this being who can incite armies, who can cause fire to fall from heaven, and this satanic being who can bring a windstorm strategically to a house to murder people, now also has the ability to inflict boils, as it says in chapter 2, verse 10, verse 9, terrible boils from head to foot all over his body. And the picture you see at the end of chapter number 2 is Job with a piece of broken pottery scraping the boils just to lance, and so that it could ooze out to get a little bit of relief, probably from elephantitis. Elephantitis. There you go. And Job's response in all this: Job did not sin with his lips. So, a question that people ask these days, and I'm just going to weigh into it, is did Job have an open door? And I alluded to this just a second ago, that I think the answer is no. I don't think that Job had an open door which invited the enemy to come in like this little foothold that Satan could say, you see, I can bring this accusation against Job. And the Lord says, well, you're right. Go ahead and do that. That's sometimes how I've heard teachers present this before. I just don't think that's the case. I'll read for you real quick what it says about Job in Job 1. Verses 4, it says, Job's sons, Job 1:4, talking about just Job as the man, Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would also invite their 3 sisters to celebrate with them. And here's oftentimes what teachers will point to say that this was an open door. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice. And so some people who are well-meaning will look into that verse and will say, you see, there's some fear there. There's him taking control, of different reasons they give. But they'll look into that verse and into that wording, and so that's the reason, that's the open door that the enemy had to come in and do all these bad things. So we need to make sure we don't have open doors in our lives, which I definitely agree. We need to make sure we don't have open doors in our lives. We've given a lot of teaching over the years about what gives Satan an open door and about generational curses and about strongholds and footholds and all of these things. I just don't think that's what's happening in this verse. The Lord twice affirms Job's integrity. Satan twice affirms Job's integrity. Job's wife affirms Job's integrity at the end of chapter number 2, and Job affirms his own integrity throughout the rest of the book. So I think this kind of fourfold witness, you couldn't get any more affirmation. I don't think that there was a cause, a foothold, an open door that Job had given in his life. I think the only reason for this was this conversation happening in the throne room. Okay. Could this kind of conversation happen again? Could Job chapter number 1 and 2 be found, nestled in between Galatians and Ephesians? Like, is it possible that this story could be found elsewhere in the Bible? I think the answer is no. I think Job and this story and this interaction between Satan and the Lord in the throne room is something that only could have happened before the cross. And I'll show you why I think that now. And I think that's important. In just a few minutes, we're going to say, what do we learn about the throne room from the book of Job? And in order to answer that the way I'm going to answer it, I think we need to think through this right now. So I think Job is an old covenant paradigm that could not happen today in this Satan-Yahweh conversation. And here's why I say that. Jesus prophesied when he was on the earth that when he was lifted up on the cross, the ruler of this world would be cast out. Jesus said just days before he died, now is the judgment of this world, and now will the ruler of this world, Satan, be cast out. When I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. He was lifted up a few feet on the cross, and then he was lifted up into the heavens in his ascension just days later. And so maybe both of them are being spoken about there. His being lifted up onto the cross and then lifted up, ascending into the heavens. And he says, when that happens, the ruler of this world will be cast out. Then, same writer, John, later on in his life, as John is writing the book of Revelation, he gets this amazing vision in Revelation chapter number 12 about Satan being cast out. And so let's look at that story now. Revelation 12. He says, "Now war arose in heaven." I believe that what John is seeing here is this epic story, this part of the story that happened maybe as Christ was dying on the cross or right after he died on the cross. So Jesus dies, he's buried, and at the same time, there's a war going on in the heavens. War arose in the heavens. Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. And there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. There's his Hebrew name, same as in Job, Satan. The deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now, at that time, now, the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. When did Jesus gain his authority? When he ascended, when he died and ascended. He said, now, all power and authority, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Matthew 28, 18 and 19, the Great Commission. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. When did the kingdom come? In the future or in his earthly life? In his earthly life. He brought the kingdom. The kingdom of God is near. It's now. And the power of God, the dunamis power of Jesus. The salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come for, here's the transition, the accuser of our brothers. What we're watching in Job, Satan accused mankind and accused Job. The accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Before our God. Remember? In the presence of our God. Accusations happening before our God. Where is God? He's on his throne. So the accuser, Satan, the dragon, is standing before the throne of God, and he brings accusations, right? Before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. His words of slander were so powerful before and were so prominent in the throne room before, but now the testimony of a new group is actually conquering, overcoming, defeating. It's more valid. It carries more weight than his slander. Their testimony defeats his slander, the testimony of the saints. For they love not their lives unto death. Remember, skin for skin. A man will give everything he has for his own life. Not so. Look at this massive army by the hundreds of millions of martyrs who loved not their life unto death. Right? They loved not their life unto death. They wouldn't even deny me when a sword was put to their neck. They wouldn't deny me at the cost of death. And so this massive army of martyrs who love not their life unto death, they all bear witness against the slanderer who says, there's no true love for Yahweh. Right? When a sword's put to their throat, they'll deny you. And the Lord says, listen to their testimony. Come on. And there, of course, all these martyrs are just following Jesus, right? Philippians chapter number 2, the great hymn to Christ. He thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but humbled himself, took upon the form of a servant, and became obedient unto death, even the death of a cross. Jesus is the greater Job. All the way to the point of his death, he did not deny the Father. Lastly, in that little picture in Revelation chapter number 12, therefore, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Why? Because the accuser of the brethren has been cast out. Satan has lost that ability to be able to stand before God's throne like he did in Job, like he did in Zechariah chapter number 3, and bring accusation and slander. He has now lost that space, and he is restricted to the earthly realm, and maybe some people would say the second heavens. More teaching on that in future times. Therefore, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So he lost his place in the heavens, and he increased his activities in the earth. And at the end of this, you see Satan. He's like brooding on a seashore. He's on the sand, and he's looking out over this water, and he's brooding that he's been cast out of the heavens. He can no longer stand before Yahweh's throne. And what does he do? In order to help him attack the woman, in order to help him attack the church and attack mankind on the earth, he summons these three beasts from the sea. The first one is the great beast, the Antichrist, who represents governmental persecution, the strong arm of government to be able to kill Christians and to force them out of their religion. Then he raises up another beast, which is the false prophet, who brings doctrinal confusion and doctrinal heresy and infuses it into the church to be able to confuse them and to not stand in their authority and walk in their inheritance. And then he raises up Babylon the whore, who's going to bring moral corruption over the whole earth. And she's going to offer the wine of her seduction to every believer, right? To get them to compromise their morals. So Satan, he brings up Babylon the whore, the false prophet, and the great beast. And he says, if I no longer have a place up there, I'll use these three as my tools, as my satanic trinity, to get the church to either quit or switch sides. But he lost his space. A throne room eviction. And so, all that is to set up this question. What does the Job story teach us about the throne room? I have 4 things to say, and we'll go through these quickly. Number 1, the Job story reveals the true nature of God's throne room sovereignty. So when you think about sovereignty, think about Job 1 and 2. If your definition of sovereignty does not coincide with or jive with Job 1 and 2 and the conversation between Satan and Yahweh, then you may need to alter your definition and understanding of sovereignty. In our generation today, so we're talking 2023, in the evangelical American church, the word sovereignty is typically used to describe God's control of an event. God's control. I'm controlling this. I'm sovereign. I'm controlling this. But sovereignty is not control. Sovereignty just means that Yahweh sits on the highest throne and that anything that happens has to be permitted by him. So it's more of an understanding of permission. One sits on the highest throne and nothing happens in the realm of his universe, right? That's not permitted by him at some level. It could be following the laws that he has set up, but everything must flow through him ultimately. It doesn't mean that he meticulously controls everything in the universe. A sovereign just means that he sits on the highest throne. But this gives such an interesting look at God and the way that he would interact with angels, the way that he would interact with Satan, what he would allow, what he would restrict. Satan could do nothing without talking to Yahweh first. Satan is not all powerful. He had to talk to Yahweh about it first. This is sovereignty. Permission more than control. I think that's helpful. Number 2. What does the Job story teach us about the throne room? The one on the throne takes notice of individual love, integrity, faith, and holiness. So it's really hard for us to wrap our mind around the fact that Yahweh could set his attention on individuals. It doesn't compute because there's billions of individuals in the earth, and when I think about one person, I think that he can't be divided, right? If he's going to think about Kelly, he can't be thinking about Jenny at the same time because he's thinking about Kelly. So how could he be thinking about Jenny, right? But that's not the way the Lord is. The Lord, in his omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, and all of his omniness, he can think just about Job and look at Job's heart and think about Job's decisions and notice Job's purity and have a conversation about Job's integrity, right? He's one who can interact with all of his creation individually almost simultaneously. It's wild to think about. I need to think about it more. But he can. This is how the Lord can intercede for multiple individuals at one time. Jesus stands and he can talk to Angela about her prayers and talk to Emily about her prayers and think about Emily's life and think about Angela's life at the same time, but he's one being. And so we can never think that, oh, I'm just little old me and God's up on his throne and he's got a lot more to worry about than just me and my life, right? He's like ruling the universe, and so who knows? He probably doesn't even care about me, right? And all of a sudden the accuser comes right into our ears. But the one on the throne actually takes notice of individual love. When you love him, when you convey your love for him, he feels it, as if you were the only one in the world. And he can have a conversation about your love. And he does have conversations about you. It's not that he can, he does. He talks about his children. He sings over his children. Does that mean he sings a billion songs at one time? I guess so. And that'll be beautiful to hear someday, right? But he sings over not just my children, but he sings over Chad. And he has a song for Chad. And he thinks about Chad, right? He's an individual God. He thinks about individual love. He thinks about your integrity. He takes notice of your faith. And he loves your holiness, just like he loved Job's holiness. Individual attention from the one on the throne. That's significant. Number 3. Throne room conversations have a direct impact on our families, finances, and physical health. I brought up those 3 because they all start with a f, even though physical health is a P, but they all start with a f, and they all go nicely with the story, right? Families, Job's children, finances, all of Job's businesses, and physical health, obviously Job's physical health. So the story of Job tells us that, but we could add many more things on to after physical health, right? But at least the Job story tells us that a conversation in the throne room had a direct bearing on a family, on a financial situation, and on physical health. That was in Job 1 and 2. And then in Job 42, once again, a throne room conversation had everything to do with Job having twice as many amount of children, twice the amount of business, and he lived for 140 more years, a good long life, right? So at the beginning and the end, we see that conversations in the throne room have direct bearing on the earth. Why that's so important is so when we stand in our place before the throne, when we take our place in the Spirit, in prayer, in intercession, we can have all the confidence in the world that this conversation that I am going to start with you, Jesus, and that you are going to start back with me, that will be heard in the presence of the Father, right? Can send forth decrees down to the earth that can affect people's real lives, their real family situation, their real financial situation, and their real physical health. Throne room conversations have real impact on our family's finances and physical health. And then number 4. And lastly, the enthronement of Christ, when he ascended and sat on his throne, exchanged day and night accusation against mankind for day and night intercession on behalf of mankind. This is why Satan had to be evicted, because you couldn't, in the same throne room, have Jesus interceding, advocating, defending, pleading for mankind with his shed blood in his own presence, and Satan, the slanderer, speaking at the same time. There's no place for that. They said, nope, that can't happen. So before the cross, you have Satan, and it says of him, day and night, giving accusation before God against humanity. And when Christ came, this war from Michael paved the way. The war with Michael and the angels paved the way. Satan out, Jesus enthroned, and now an entire new dynamic exists in the throne room. It's important, I think, when we can understand the past, we can more fully appreciate the present, right? We can understand the past when we fully appreciate the present. When I know your past, I more fully appreciate your present, right? This is the power of our testimony series. Let me hear your story, and now, wow, that's a much bigger deal. Seeing Chris here on a Sunday morning, and now that I know his past, right, from his testimony. 4th of July, What do we do? Sometimes we talk about the wars in the past, or we